Welcome to There's a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. Today, as I've talked about this week, I have a very special guest who I met. Her name is Dr. Delisha Haynes, and she is the author of The Dawn. And I'm going to interview her today. I'm going to talk a little bit about her practice, her book, and physical fitness. How are you doing this morning, Dr. Haynes?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this, and I've thrown your name around a little bit on social media, and it turns out a lot of my friends and followers have been patients of yours.
Awesome.
So they were very excited to hear this. They actually said, "Oh, she's great. Tell her I said hello." So I know I really can't do that, but
Hello.
All right.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about your book, The Dawn. I think it's a great concept. It says a med student's roadmap to finding a light in the darkest hour.
Yeah, so I wrote the book in 2019, but the research from the book I actually did a lot earlier than that. So I have a history of depression, had struggled with depression, and really thought I was the only one. Like, I thought I was the weak link. Everybody else is doing this med school thing fine. I actually took time off to be treated and came back. And when I came to residency in Daytona Beach, we had to do a grand rounds. And I did mine on the topic of suicide and depression amongst physicians, and then really learned how common it is. And that really just got me to be more of an advocate, first for myself, and then also for, other healers and people in general, because it obviously affects people outside of the medical profession. But really the time when I wrote the book was after I lost my best friend to suicide, who it blindsided me. I didn't realize it, but I promised myself that I knew that my silence wasn't helping anyone. And I hadn't talked about this area because, I was trying to start a practice, and I didn't want to become known as like the depressed doctor and that sort of thing. And but really, this is one of those, like, your love has to be greater than your fear moments, and wanting to pay it forward to that individual who helped me so much by really helping to destigmatize and just get the word out, and sharing my own personal journey in addition to all the statistics.
Okay. Wow, that's love has to be greater than the fear. I love that. So what is the actual percentage among physicians who commit suicide? Do we know the numbers?
So we lose about over 400 physicians to suicide every year, and there's a lot. Depression, it's estimated that about 30% of students in training struggle with depression at some point. And those are probably underreported because there's a lot of people who don't ever get help, and there's a lot of people who may die actually by suicide, but because of how it looks, it's classified otherwise. But it's a huge problem that we don't talk about.
So do we know why? Do we know why the suicide is so high among med students? Is it the pressure? Is it biological? Is it a combination of both? Is it the parental drive? All those types of things?
It is a combination, and I think that's the hard part. Whether you're talking about a physician or someone in the general community, there is not just one thing, and I think that's the hardest part for my people who are, especially think of my patients who are doing well financially. They've got good relationships, and they're like, I don't have a reason to feel this way. And there doesn't always have to be a specific event or reason, and to always look for that you can really miss treating people if you're just looking for that. But there are definitely things that put people at more risk. So loss of relationships. So relationships are so important in staying connected. And typically when you're going to medical school, you're disconnected from people. You're studying. They're not going through medical school. They don't know what you're going through. The people who are going through with you probably have their own issues and may not be able to help. So it's really this isolation. There's stress, there's sleep deprivation, there's nutritional aspects of it. But then there's also, just in my case, I had a history of depression prior to medical school. And I didn't know that I was entering the profession with one of the highest suicide rates. Had I known that, I could have come in more prepared. So I just was ill prepared for what was happening. I knew I was depressed when it started happening in my second year of medical school, and I was just mad. I was like, this shouldn't happen to me. I know what depression is. I should be immune. And, but, knowing what cancer is doesn't make you immune for that either. But I really would have been in a much better position had I known coming in that I was going into that environment, so that I could have really bolstered the support, the sleep, just all those things that we know that are important to prioritize for overall health, and especially for mental health.
So what would you have done different? I know that you want to get your book into more medical schools, and is it currently in any of the schools now?
It is. So it's Florida State University College of Medicine. I'm faculty there. There was one individual who died by suicide. He was a second-year medical student. His father wrote one of the forwards of the book.
Okay.
And Matt Whitman was his name, and an amazing individual. And so he was also, in addition to my friend that I lost, another reason I was like, okay, I've got to.
Was your friend in medical school?
My friend was a lawyer. Okay. Which is also an area with a really high stress and a high depression and suicide rate. But this, was a med student, and after it happened, I went to Dr. Dunn, who was the dean at the time, and I said, I need to come in and talk to your students, and you can't be in the room. And because he trusted me, I went in and sat on a stool and just kind of explained my own history, not knowing that a lot of the students in the class, they'd come in with Matt. He ended up being a year behind them because of some academic struggles, and they were really struggling with feeling like they, left him behind, weren't there for them. They really, really struggling. But they also came up with some fantastic ideas of what to do going forward to really normalize mental health check-ins, which I'm proud to say that Florida State does to this day.
Very good. So outside of trying to get the book in the more hands of medical students, what would be your advice to them? What is something they can do to help themselves? Maybe what would you have liked to have known? The rates and maybe what else going into that?
Definitely the rates, because just knowing that you're not alone is really helpful. And so
the old Me Too thing,
right? It's this is a thing. 30% is a pretty high number, and then also really just normalizing the mental health check-ins, which was something that now they do at Florida State, where you go in and you're having a conversation with the therapist. It may be 10 minutes, it may be 2 hours. But just normalizing that we're going to have these check-ins the same way you go to the dentist and you have a preventive visit, that you can have a preventive mental health visit as well. And so they're really kind of taking that approach. I think they do it in the first year, and then they do it before they take their first kind of major national tests. And that actually came out of that room when, I was talking to those students, and those students went back and became advocates and really made it happen.
Okay, that's good. So I want to make a little segue here, because as you were talking, I know that you're really into sports, health and fitness. And, I had heard that your dad's a pretty great athlete, and you come from a real athletic family, and you were athletic. And you didn't go to Florida State, right? Where did you go to school?
So undergrad, I went to the University of Louisville, and where I was a Division I track and field athlete.
Nice. What was your event?
Well, I was good at the hurdles and the triple jump. I had this school record in those.
In Louisville?
In Louisville, yeah.
Wow.
Not anymore.
Okay.
There was a time.
Records are made to be broken.
Exactly. I have one left, I think, that's still standing.
What one is it? What event?
It's an event that they don't even do, which is why it's still standing. It's
there you go.
The shuttle hurdle relay.
Yeah.
It's completely made up.
Yeah.
But it may still be on the books. And then my dad was in the 1976 Olympics for triple jump.
Wow, that's awesome.
They used to announce that before I jumped, no pressure, right?
No pressure. God, talk about following in tough footsteps. So that obviously kind of got you into sports at a young age, because obviously to be a Division I athlete, that's not easy.
No, but it was, I thought I was going to go to the Olympics.
Okay.
In my mind, it was the natural next step because my dad did it. I didn't realize, it wasn't until I got to college that I realized like, it's not the just natural next step.
Right. But that's still impressive.
Yeah, no,
What is it? Less than
it.
1% of kids make it to college athletics, to Division I, something like
Is
that.
that it? Okay.
It's very low.
Okay.
So yeah. So you're very elite to get there. So did that help? Like, did the fitness and training, was that like help with mental health?
Absolutely. So, in high school, going back to high school, so my senior year of high school, I got moved to Kentucky from Maryland. Culture shock, very, very different. I came in, I messed up the top 10 seniors with my GPA. People didn't know if my GPA was real. And, I didn't have, friends when I first was there. And actually, that's when I first became depressed and didn't know what it was. Luckily, I had a high school teacher, who recognized in my writings when I started writing, it'd be better off if I wasn't here. And she intervened.
Wow. Okay.
I still credit Miss Bowker with saving my life.
That's awesome.
And she's still, friends of my family to this day. And I did start seeing a therapist, but also track season came around. And my dad actually became the track coach because he knew I was struggling. They were considering, I became suicidal, and they were considering sending me back to Maryland, like maybe it would help if she was back in that environment. But we stayed together in Kentucky, and he wanted to keep tabs on me. And the track coach at the high school was not very good.
Sadly, it happens too much, right?
Right. Well, he was the football coach and had us in like a 3-point stance, and didn't really know how to treat.
Didn't understand track.
Didn't know how to coach hurdles and some of those things. And so my dad came out, and I think he was the track coach probably 6 years after.
So you guys
I left.
had an elite track coach.
We did. We actually were the state champions.
Yeah, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world if you played the sport.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I know that you do some obesity work now in your practice, and before you get into that, I think your practice is really unique and cool. I think more and more physicians are starting to get into it. But can you talk a little bit about what separates your practice from, say, a normal physician's office nowadays?
Right. Yeah. So we became the area's first direct primary care practice back in 2015. When I started my practice straight out of residency, I was insurance based because all of my mentors did it that way, and so I did what they did. And then I just saw the writing on the wall of where healthcare was going, where insurances were just more in the exam room. Of course, the reimbursements were going down. The year before I decided to transition, I got a letter from the insurance company with like the most patients, the most covered lives in the area, the 40% cut to how much they were going to pay. And they were just kind of like, take it or leave it.
Do you think that's going to get worse, or do you think that's going to get better? Like, what would be your prediction?
I don't know if it's going to get better. Of course, now I'm not in it, but
right.
I think that if there's no competition, then you can charge whatever you want.
Right.
And that's what they said. We own all the covered lives in this area, is with their exact words. And they didn't earn. It wasn't all, but it was a huge chunk. And I knew that I'm not near retirement age, and I love what I do. I didn't like how I was being forced to do it. So between that and then a local hospital poached my biller. So they needed billers, so they started coming around to doctors' offices and offering the billers at the doctor's office these amazing packages. And she came up to me one day and she's like, I wasn't looking for this. And I was like, well, you need to take that because I can't match it.
I imagine that's hard.
Yeah.
Do billing and all that. I imagine it's a specialty.
And it's essential.
Right.
It's more tedious than anything, because they won't pay you for this, and then you have to go fight. Well, you've already provided the service, so it's not like you would take it back anyway. Yeah. After the fact, and it was just really, I was like, this is really not necessary. Like, my hairdresser does my hair, and I pay her, and we just
have a good relationship.
Move on, right?
A win-win.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, I've got a set of skills that are in high demand and they're good. Let me just move the middleman out of the way.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So how does it work essentially? How does it work? Do people pay as they go? Or how would they become a patient?
Yeah, so they're all patient members of the practice.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a gym membership to your doctor's office. So there's a flat monthly rate, and you can come in, as many times as you want. So it covers all of your visits.
Monday through Friday type of thing, or
we're Monday through Thursday.
Okay,
but
so 4 days a week.
4 days a week, exactly. And, if they need to have an EKG to check their heart, or a spirometry for their lung function, or urinalysis because I think they have a UTI, the things that we do at the practice are, really most of them are included in the membership.
Okay.
We draw blood at our practice, and, that we negotiated these great rates.
To get them measured.
Yeah, so a lipid panel for our patients is like $6.
For those that don't know, I just made it look like, wow, we're not on video, but I was like, God, that's less than what I pay for my insurance to get a lipid profile.
Well, and it's one of those things, like, I didn't know the cost of anything before I was in this style of medicine. I just knew that you needed it, so I would just write, you need this, get it done. And now I'm the one that's going to make the recommendation for it, because I do know that you need it. I'm also in the best position to negotiate for it at the best rate. And the highest quality. And so we do a lot of that. We have a diverse patient panel. Some patients have no insurance at all. We have a lot of small business owners. And then we have people who, they have what they consider great insurance, but they want personalized medicine.
Right.
And so
they can still use their insurance for other things, maybe like to get their labs, or obviously hospitalization.
Exactly. They're seeing being referred out, any of those types of things.
Right. I mean, when you told me about it and I looked into it a little bit, it's really interesting. And I know a couple other doctors are doing something like that. And I find it very interesting. So you feel like you can really treat the patient without any middleman telling you what to do.
Yeah,
right?
It's nice. Like your patients hire you and fire you.
Right. And and that's a fair system. That's what I've been in business, for 30 years. And that's one of the big reasons I went into business for myself, is because I know what I'm doing, and I didn't want anybody to try to interfere with something I really believe in.
Right.
So I think that's pretty neat. All right, let's shift over to obesity management, because you and I both agree it's a national epidemic. It's a worldwide epidemic. 60 to 70% of the world is obese or overweight right now. So what is your take on that? What's your take on obesity, and what do you think we need to do as a nation moving forward?
Oh, there's so many things.
I know, it's like...
Where do you start? Well, and I should say, so I'm board certified both in family medicine and obesity medicine, and I became the first doctor in our area to become board certified in obesity medicine because I was failing at helping my patients in that area. And so it was like, okay, I need to find better tools, find out the why underneath it, which is a lot of mental mindset. And so it, that always kind of comes to the forefront. But it was really just kind of, trying to, and recognizing how much it impacts everything else that I treat. There's not a chronic condition that I treat that is not impacted negatively by obesity.
Right. It never makes anything better.
Right. So whether it's your arthritis or your diabetes or your high blood pressure, your kidneys.
Depression.
Yeah, depression, definitely. Hormones. It just really was one of those things that across the board was, negatively impacting everything else. So I had to get better at treating it. And it does, it first starts with kind of like setting that kind of environment where it makes it easier for your body to, let go of unwanted weight.
Right. So what do you think is the biggest, we always talk about processed foods and convenience and lack of moving, Is there anything more to it that we're missing, do you think? Like when you're treating patients, like, is there something everybody's missing? Like, in my opinion, it's been that most people know for the most part what they have to do and should do, but most people aren't feeling motivated to do it, or they're feeling confused. What's your take on that?
I think definitely a lot of that emotions is
emotional leaders,
emotional everything.
Yeah.
And then sleep.
Okay.
So, where I start at, and one of the first questions I ask is, how many hours of uninterrupted sleep are you getting?
Okay.
Because we know that people who are shift workers and they're up all night, the obesity rates in those individuals are off the charts. We were not made to be up at that time, but now we've got so many artificial things that can help to keep us up.
Right.
That it's very commonplace for people to do that. People are getting up because they have to use the bathroom several times a night. So they're not they might say they get 8 hours of sleep, but it's like, no, you took 2-hour naps,
right. That's probably
times.
Most common, right?
Yeah, right. And so when we talk about things like immune system and hormone regulation and as we get older, we start to lose muscle mass.
Right.
So that affects our metabolism.
Right.
If you're
for sure.
eating the same and doing everything else the same. But one of the areas where I start is always kind of a mental health place, because sleep really, really impacts our mental health. But definitely, making sure that they are getting that sleep in.
So do you think it's a high cortisol rate maybe? Do you think that's part of it? Like the lack of sleep is leading to more cortisol in the system, which is maybe leading to a little more fat retention. Do you think that's a big part of it?
That's one part of it. But when we think of hormones, like every hormone,
right,
has some kind of pattern in terms of how it's secreted, whether it's a diurnal pattern or, and when people aren't sleeping well, it's going to impact that. So especially with, our diabetics, but even with other disease processes and just in general. So when people aren't sleeping well, they're really, how it impacts you emotionally. Like you're like a live wire. You're like a cranky 2-year-old. You just know that you're not allowed to fall out on the floor.
Right.
But you feel like you want to. And so many people are just trying to, just caffeinate themselves, during
all
the day and
then
try to take something to put themselves down at night. And they never get really high quality sleep where your body actually gets a chance to heal. Where you get to decrease inflammation.
Regenerate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you believe in some of the hormone medications? Do you think that's a good route for some people to go? Is that like a big part of therapy for people, do you think?
I think that it's being a bit overdone.
Okay.
So I think that it is important. And I think, so when it comes to HRT or hormone replacement therapy,
right.
The pendulum has swung all over the place. I was in medical school when the nurses study came out, where they linked hormone replacement therapy to increased cardiovascular risk.
I remember that.
And my dean of students was an OBGYN who had just been putting people on, things then, and really had to scale back with that, with that study. And of course, now we know that when they looked, really, they segmented people out. It was people who'd been on it for over 10 years.
Okay.
And there were, caveats to that. So, but the pendulum swung in a whole different direction, and now it's kind of swinging to, in another, direction. And I think that there's a lot of people who are, getting on bioidentical hormones and getting on different things, and they make you feel amazing. But they're not always, the science behind them is not always, there for, especially for that person. Like if you didn't know what their testosterone level was before and you treat them to this really super therapeutic dose,
right.
There can be some negative impacts to that. So I'm not against it. I do prescribe hormones for patients, when it's accurate. But I do think that it's not always an outside-in approach that we need to take.
Yeah, so like most things, and unfortunately in this country, we're not big fans of middle ground, right? Mm-hmm. But it sounds like maybe we need more middle ground. Like that's not a treatment for everybody, and it's not a treatment for nobody. It's a treatment for some people.
Exactly.
Because I do know, unfortunately, I see it more and more in social media where a lot of men are doing, a lot of testosterone, through their physicians and stuff, and people ask me, well, there's there side effects? And so, well, of course there is. I mean, and did they really need it? So yeah, I think there's a middle ground with that. And I appreciate you giving that nice, honest answer. I know the women are going to thank you for that because they ask me all the time. And I say, it's out of my scope of practice whether you should be doing that or not. And it comes up all the time, which is why I ask, because a lot of women want to know, they go through menopause and it's like, I'm gaining weight, I'm, not sleeping, the deal, and and that's a very common question. What about some of the supplements that men and women get on? Do you think there's any that are viable, or do you think it's, what do you think?
There's a lot that are viable. I think the issue with that, and like we're talking about, I mentioned the bioidentical hormones, is that not that the FDA is, above reproach by any means, but they're not FDA cleared. So you don't really know what you're getting from one pill to the next. But I do, like, we have some supplements in our office. We have omega-3 fish oils, high quality. We have some things that we keep there.
Ginkgo biloba, is that, like, I know some of the women, is that good for women with hormones, or is that more brain?
It's known more in terms of brain, but there are, there's uses for a lot of different things. One thing that to know about is that they can react to the medications that you're on. And I attract a lot of naturalists, and I love them. But I have to remind them, like, arsenic is natural. So not just because, just because it's natural doesn't mean that it can't harm you. Or, we're using it because it creates a response. And if it's not something that's been studied really well, then it's hard to know. People ask me all the time, and I'm like, I don't always know what the reaction is going to be between this and this, because the studies aren't really there. I never, I want people to feel comfortable telling me what they're on, and I never like badmouth anything unless I know that
it's dangerous, because there are some.
For them. Yeah, and especially it's for the person. Like, if you've got good kidneys and you've got good liver, you can usually. You're going to just pee it out and have really expensive urine usually.
Yeah, a lot of vitamins.
Right, yeah. But there are other people who they don't have great kidney function.
True.
They don't have, and
so they're not filtering as well.
They're not.
It's
it can be adding
toxic.
up and interacting with other things. So, and supplements are meant to supplement. I think we've gotten to this where people are eating supplements almost instead of like focusing on actually like food and nutrition and that part. Yeah.
And for the listeners that don't know, the FDA doesn't regulate most supplements. So that's what we're really talking about. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know absolutely everything all the time. Everybody makes mistakes, but I usually prefer things to be looked at by somebody, especially if I'm getting it from somebody I don't know and they're telling me this magic pill and there's no label on it. I would, caution anybody. So, and one last thing, I wanted to bring up your journal. Can you tell everybody the name of it? Because I purchased it, and I think it's phenomenal because, we can read about things all the time, but if we don't sit down with pen and paper and get alone with our thoughts and work things out, it's kind of hard to get better. I purchased it. I think it's an awesome tool. I recommended it to some of my friends and associates here, and they purchased it. So talk a little bit about your journal. Now, this is outside of Dr. Haynes' book, The Dawn. She also has a journal. So tell everybody about that too.
Yeah, and they're related. I tend to create things that I need, and then other people benefit from them.
Me too.
I was trying to run my practice, and I started coaching other physicians and helping them to start their own practices. My mom got sick, and I was meaning to call her doctor, and I didn't because I kept running out of time in the day. And she ended up going for a surgery that she didn't need. And they found out in the surgery that what they thought was localized cancer was stage 4. And she then had some surgical complications and then started chemo without eating for 7 days because of the bowel obstruction that she got post-surgically. And I beat myself up because had I known that they hadn't done an imaging study and they took my mom to surgery without one, I could have stopped it. She still would have ended up dying. Like, I know the type of cancer that she had, but I could have kept her from suffering. And the reason that I didn't do it was because I didn't have my day kind of set up where I could really keep the things that were most important. I got pulled away from these other fires that I need to put out.
What was Stephen Covey's? What did he say? Keep the Right when you said that, it's a famous...
First thing.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah. And then also I that year prior to that happening, I had been in a car accident and had a concussion. And I'd never had a brain injury before.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of those things together, and I just was like, I have got to find a way to take care of myself, to, get the things done that I'm, medicine's a calling for me. So like it's non-negotiable. I got to find a way to do this.
Right.
But this is my mom, like I dropped one of the biggest balls that, is in my life. So what can I do to, like, on a daily basis, do those things? And then I started this whole, journey in research and neuroscience and personal development. And then I was like, okay, but I need to get this like in a day.
Right.
I need to kind of fit this into some bumper rails. And I was looking at a lot of planners that were out there, and they just didn't have that whole kind of starting your day off with intention and ending it with, kind of like the gratitude and
right.
what's next for you. And, having that 24 hours, this is what accountability, this
right.
is what you did, and how much of that did you sleep? And then the priorities, because I was getting pulled away by my to-do list, but my priorities weren't happening.
Right.
And so I basically created what I needed, and as a way to kind of put those all onto one page. And I'm a huge fan of the SAVERS acronym. So it's from the book Miracle Morning. So you basically you start your day kind of thinking about the essence for silence. So taking some time for yourself, affirmations and visualizations, exercise, reading, and an essence scribe. And I don't do all of it.
Right.
In the journal, it has an area we can kind of do a little check off.
Right.
But just really being more intentional about how I was investing my time, because it's not promised.
Yeah, that's awesome. So in a way, kind of describe the journal as, and I forget what he said, but basically he said, make the most important thing the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that would be the best way to describe it. And also Stephen Covey says, like you do, that checklists don't always ensure that we're doing that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's important to really organize what we're supposed to do. So that's a great tool for everybody.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say? I mean, we definitely want to have you come back. This is great. Is there anything you'd like to finish with saying to everybody out there?
Really, I just want to encourage people to take care of themselves. I think we don't always put ourselves first, and sometimes
it's not selfish too.
It's not selfish. It's
right.
It's that whole put the action on yourself first. Mm-hmm. Is really, really good.
Yeah.
It allows you to take care of yourself. One of my favorite quotes, and it's in the planner as well, is a quote from Lisa Nichols, and it says, "Fill your cup, serve from your overflow." And I have to remind myself of that, because when I start to feel like I'm tired, I don't want to do things anymore, it's usually because I'm serving from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Or I'm giving somebody what I need. And so really, my responsibility to myself is to fill my own cup. And then when I'm serving other people, it's not from what's in my cup, that's for me. It's my overflow.
That's an awesome place to finish. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank everybody for listening. That was just an outstanding interview. I am so thankful. That was so awesome. I want to thank our sponsors, Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group Realty Pros. They currently have over 280 5-star reviews on Zillow, and they can be reached at thegildengroup.com. And I want to thank Daytona Beach Overhead Door Company, Jeff and Zach Hawk, the best garage doors around. All right. Be well.